the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC. It sounds so regal, doesn't it? So dependable. For decades, RBC has carefully cultivated an image of stability, trustworthiness, and quiet Canadian competence. But here's the thing about carefully constructed images. They're fragile. And if you lean in just a little closer, if you peek behind the polished marble and the friendly teller smiles, you start to see the cracks. And beneath those cracks, oh, it's a whole world of mess. We're talking about a level of corporate shenanigans that would make a soap opera writer blush. It's a story of secret affairs, international crime, and environmental hypocrisy on a truly breathtaking scale. Let's start at the top, shall we? Because nothing says stable and trustworthy quite like a messy office romance scandal involving your chief financial officer. In April 2024, RBC unceremoniously fired its CFO, Nadine on what was, rather poetically, her 25th anniversary with the bank. The reason? An alleged decade-long inappropriate relationship with another finance executive, Ken Mason. According to the investigation, the pair would schedule meetings in their calendars under the code name liquidity discussions. Yes, liquidity. You cannot make this stuff up. They also reportedly exchanged poetry and text declaring "I love you," which is sweet, I suppose, if it weren't all wrapped up in a potential breach of corporate ethics. The bank claims that An used her powerful position to grant Mason undeserved promotions and pay raises. The bank is now trying to claw back millions in compensation from An, a move that would make her the first woman to have her pay taken back under new SEC regulations. This whole affair raises serious questions about the culture at RBC. How does a secret relationship between two high-ranking executives go unnoticed for supposedly 10 years? Now, if you thought the drama was contained to the C-suite in Toronto, allow me to introduce you to RBC's international escapades. Let's take a trip to Paris, the city of lights, of love, and, as it turns out, of RBC getting convicted for helping rich people dodge their taxes. That's right. On March 5th, 2024, a subsidiary of the bank, the RBC Trust Company Bahamas Limited, was officially convicted by the French Court of Appeal. The charge? Aiding and abetting tax fraud. This isn't some minor regulatory slap on the wrist. This is a criminal conviction in a major European country. The case involved a complex scheme where the bank's Bahamian branch helped wealthy French clients hide their assets from the taxman. Think of it like a magic trick, but instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you make a pile of money disappear from your tax forms. And RBC, our friendly, trustworthy Canadian bank, was the magician's assistant. This conviction wasn't a surprise. It was the final word after a long legal battle, confirming that the bank played a key role in a system designed to cheat the French government out of its rightful tax revenue. This is the kind of behavior you expect from a shady, fly-by-night operation in a spy movie, not from one of the world's largest financial institutions. The conviction itself is bad enough, but what it represents is even more troubling. It shows a willingness to engage in legally and ethically dubious practices for the sake of profit. So, your bank gets convicted of a crime in France. You'd think that would have some serious consequences, right? Well, not if you're big enough. You see, a criminal conviction like tax fraud can get you automatically disqualified from certain lucrative business activities in the United States. It's a rule designed to keep bad actors out of the market. But for RBC, it was less of a roadblock and more of a minor inconvenience that required some paperwork. Because instead of being barred, RBC simply asked for and received special legal exemptions from U.S. regulators. These exemptions, which allow the bank to continue its U.S. business activities without interruption, have been extended all the way to March 2030. That's a 6-year pass. It's the regulatory equivalent of a teacher catching a student cheating on a test and responding by saying, "Well, don't do it again for the next 6 years, okay? Here's a gold star for your honesty." It's an astonishing display of how financial giants can navigate the consequences that would crush a smaller company. This raises serious questions about the effectiveness of our regulatory systems. If a criminal conviction doesn't lead to real, tangible consequences, then what's the point of having the rule in the first place? It creates a two-tiered system of justice. One for the little guys, and one for the banks that are apparently too big to fail, or it seems, too big to bar. While the French court delivered a guilty verdict, the U.S. regulatory system effectively shrugged its shoulders and said, "Carry on." If you thought tax fraud was the only financial crime on the menu, I'm afraid you're mistaken. Let's talk about money laundering. You know, the process of making dirty money from illegal activities look clean. It's the financial backbone of organized crime, drug trafficking, and terrorism, and banks are our first line of defense against it. They are legally required to report suspicious transactions to the authorities. It's a critical responsibility. So, how did RBC do? Well, in December 2023, Canada's Financial Intelligence Agency, FINTRAC, hit them with a whopping $7.4 million penalty for failing to do just that. During a compliance examination in 2022, FINTRAC reviewed 130 case files at the bank where there were red flags. Out of those 130 cases, RBC had failed to submit a suspicious transaction report in 16 of them. These weren't borderline cases either. The regulator stated there were reasonable grounds to suspect that the transactions were related to money laundering. The bank had the information, saw the red flags, and simply didn't file the required reports. It's like a security guard seeing someone climbing through a window and deciding it's probably just a new, athletic way of entering the building. The $7.4 million penalty was one of the largest of its kind ever issued in Canada. But let's be real here. For a bank that makes billions of dollars in profit every quarter, a $7.4 million fine is a rounding error. It's the financial equivalent of a parking ticket. The real damage is to its reputation as a safe and secure institution. Banks are built on trust. Failing to report potential money laundering is a fundamental betrayal of that trust. All right, let's shift gears from financial crime to a different kind of deception: environmental posturing. If you've seen any of RBC's recent marketing, you'd think the bank was run by Captain Planet himself. They talk a big game about their commitment to a sustainable future, their support for the Paris Agreement, and their role in financing the green transition. Their website is filled with pictures of windmills and solar panels. They position themselves as a leader in the fight against climate change. It's a beautiful, inspiring message. And according to a formal investigation by Canada's Competition Bureau, it might just be a massive pile of hot air. The investigation was launched after a group of complainants alleged that RBC was engaging in false and misleading advertising, a practice commonly known as greenwashing. The core of the complaint is simple. While RBC publicly pats itself on the back for its climate credentials, it is simultaneously one of the world's biggest financiers of the fossil fuel industry. It's like a firefighter showing up to a blaze with a hose in one hand and a can of gasoline in the other. You can't claim to be solving a problem that you are actively and very profitably making worse. The complainants are not just asking for a slap on the wrist. They want the Competition Bureau to force RBC to remove all of its feel-good environmental claims and to hit the bank with a significant fine. They argue that RBC is misleading consumers and investors by creating a false impression of its environmental performance. RBC wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants the public relations boost of being seen as a climate champion without making the difficult financial sacrifices required to actually be one. So, how bad is RBC's fossil fuel habit really? Let's put some numbers on it, because they are truly staggering. According to the 2023 Banking on Climate Chaos report, RBC isn't just a minor player in the fossil fuel game. It is Canada's #1 undisputed champion of fossil fuel financing. And on the world stage, it proudly holds the title of the 7th dirtiest bank in the world. In 2023 alone, the bank poured over $28 billion into the fossil fuel industry. That's billion with a B. But it gets worse. Since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2016, an international accord aimed at limiting global warming, RBC has shoveled an almost unbelievable $256 billion into fossil fuels. Let that number sink in. $250 billion. While world leaders were making commitments to save the planet, and while RBC was publicly claiming to support those goals, the bank was busy writing check after check to the very industries driving the climate crisis. The problem is systemic in Canada. 3 of the country's biggest banks, RBC, Scotiabank, and TD, made the top 12 Dirty Dozen list of global fossil fuel financiers. For a country with a relatively small population, Canada's financial system has an enormous and disproportionate impact on funding the climate crisis, and RBC is leading the charge. This isn't just about keeping the lights on with existing infrastructure. This is about financing the expansion of the fossil fuel industry, locking in decades of future emissions, and making it that much harder to transition to a clean energy economy. The impact of RBC's fossil fuel financing isn't just environmental, it's also deeply human. Many of the massive energy projects the bank funds, like the Coastal GasLink pipeline in British Columbia, cut directly through the traditional and unceded territories of Indigenous peoples. This has led to years of conflict, protests, and accusations that the bank is prioritizing profits over the fundamental rights of Indigenous communities. At the bank's 2024 annual general meeting, this tension boiled over in a very public way. Indigenous leaders and climate activists directly confronted RBC's CEO, Dave McKay, over the bank's continued financing of oil and gas expansion. When McKay claimed that the Coastal GasLink project had full support, Indigenous leaders in the room immediately called him out, labeling his statement a manipulative distortion of reality. One leader bluntly stated, "There was a war up there," referencing the intense standoffs and global protests in support of the Wet'suwet'en people who opposed the pipeline. This is the ugly, on-the-ground reality of RBC's investment strategy. While executives in Toronto boardrooms see lines on a balance sheet, communities on the front lines see their land, water, and way of life threatened. The concept of free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC, is a cornerstone of international law regarding Indigenous rights. It means that Indigenous peoples have the right to give or withhold consent to projects that affect them and their territories. Critics argue that by financing projects that lack this consent from all relevant governing bodies, RBC is complicit in the violation of those rights. The bank's claims of support for reconciliation with Indigenous peoples ring hollow when contrasted with its actions. You cannot claim to be a partner in reconciliation while simultaneously funding projects that are actively opposed by the very communities you claim to support. So, here we are. We've journeyed through a scandal-ridden executive suite, a criminal conviction in France, a massive failure to stop money laundering, and a level of environmental hypocrisy that is simply off the charts. We've seen how the Royal Bank of Canada, an institution built on an image of trust and stability, has been caught up in a pattern of behavior that is anything but trustworthy. You might be thinking, okay, that's all terrible, but I just have a checking account and a credit card. What does this have to do with me? And the answer is everything. Where you put your money matters. The banks we choose to do business with are not passive vaults. They are powerful engines that shape our world. They decide which projects get funded and which ones don't. They decide whether our economy moves toward a sustainable future or doubles down on the destructive practices of the past. Your money, combined with millions of others, gives them that power. The secrets of RBC are important because they reveal the true character of one of the most powerful institutions in the country. They show us that behind the friendly ads and the sleek corporate branding, there is a machine that has prioritized profit over ethics, legality, and even the health of our planet. The executive scandal, the tax fraud conviction, the money laundering failures, and the greenwashing are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a corporate culture that has lost its way, a culture that believes it is too big to be held to the same standards as everyone else. This isn't about hating banks. It's about demanding better from them. We, as customers and citizens, have a role to play. We can ask tough questions. We can move our money. We can support institutions that align with our values. The shocking truths about RBC matter because they are a wake-up call. They remind us that we need to pay attention, to look past the polished surface, and to demand that the institutions we entrust with our money act with the integrity they so loudly claim to possess. Because a bank should be more than just a place for our money. It should be a force for good. And right now, RBC has a long, long way to go.